Hello and welcome. I am Bill Coles, author of the new novel, Guardian of Deceit, and we're here tonight to have a conversation with two artists about illustrating literary fiction. I run the website storyliteraryfiction.com, and for the past couple of years I've illustrated all my work, short stories and novels, in print and online. Illustrations add to the understanding and promotion of a story. The illustrations I've used on-site and in print have been collected in an on-site art gallery and are available for purchase as posters, note cards, and even t-shirts. We have the pleasure of talking with Betty Harper, the Elvis artist from Nashville, and Peter Healy, artist, cartoonist, and illustrator from Los Angeles. Thanks both of you for participating tonight. Our moderator and voice owner is Amara Pierce from Book Candy Studios. First, I'd like to ask each of you to tell us about yourself. When did you start to draw, and how did you learn your art? Betty, you first, please.
Art found me when I was very young, and it just hasn't let go yet. I like drawing people, done a lot of portraits over the years. I came to Nashville, Tennessee in the late 60s to pursue doing album covers and in the music business, and did a lot of portrait work. Got into doing some illustrations and found that illustrating was something that I really liked. Over the years, I've illustrated a lot of book covers, stories. I'm an official artist for Elvis Presley Enterprises and for Muhammad Ali Enterprises, and I love what I do, and I love the aspect of illustrating stories.
You sure can see it in your artwork. There's no doubt about that. Peter, what is your art history?
Well, again, just like Betty, I started drawing at an early age, and it kind of really spoke to me, and seemed to be a good language for me to use. And I just continued from an early age through the adulthood, and then I traveled a little bit around Europe just to see more people and examples of places, and tried to let those influence my work as I went along. And since moving to LA, I've had solo exhibition in Ireland, album covers. I've just been enjoying more and more types of illustration, and I absolutely love illustrating stories, fiction, anything that I get to translate in my own way and work with somebody else on, help them translate their work in another language. Just as impassioned as that is, it's never let me go either. If it's going at this stage.
Good. Thanks, Peter. I'd like to proceed with showing some of the artwork that these two artists have done, both for the site and for themselves in other venues. Could we put up first the Surgeon's Wife from New Orleans? This is Betty Harper's drawing. It's for a novel, The Surgeon's Wife. It illustrates part one. Betty, how was this idea generated? How did you develop it on the page?
In chapter one, there was an important point of where the two people came together, and that was in Jackson Square. So I wanted to really show the excitement, the color of the square, of being there, and then the closeness of those two people. Their faces, what they looked like, didn't matter. It was what they were doing and where they were.
You can see
the color to make it as bright and exciting.
You can see the excitement in this in Jackson Square, and Betty, I know you do a number of New Orleans scenes and New Orleans people and jazz musicians, which are all wonderful. Just to remind those who are listening, you can actually access Betty's site or Peter's site or the art gallery in Story on Literary Fiction through links that will be posted on the screen. The next one, please, The Surgeon's Wife, Helen. This is one of my favorite illustrations.
Helen was a troubled young lady, a few demons here and there. And here again, I wanted the dark side and the back streets of New Orleans, and you see the streetcar coming. Sort of illusion of an angel, off to your right there. Yeah, the ones that we did for this book, this one is probably my favorite. The darks, the lights.
My favorite too. Well, this troubled woman. But one of the things I really admire about that is the angel with the dreadlocks. What were the techniques that you specially used to do that? I noticed on your URL for this painting that it said underpainting. Was that a part of the process?
Yeah, I drew the girl. And I actually did her in colored pencil. And most of the sections of this were drawn separately. And then I scanned them in the computer and put them together. And when it says underpainting, you can actually go into textures and just put a texture to it. So it is a lot of computer work combined with pencil work.
That's great.
To get the overall effect.
Yes, thanks. Do we have the next one, the truck scene from, yes. How did this come about, Betty? This is wonderful in its detail, but also in its striking figures.
Well, in this was a short story.
Yes,
that you did.
yes.
And I read many times before and deciphered it, and came down to the point that what was so important in this particular story was the fact that this man did something he never did. He broke his rule. He never, ever picked up a hitchhiker. So that was my point of getting across right here, was that moment where he decides that he's going to do it. And so he's looking in the mirror and he sees the girl standing behind him. And I thought that was very important to that whole story, was that the fact that he broke his...
Absolutely. And it ended up in disaster in many ways for him too. Yeah. Enid, please, the next... this is a drawing from your book that you illustrated, a children's book. And I wondered about how you see the differences between the illustrations for a children's book than for a single story or for a few drawings for a novel.
I don't really see that much of a difference. When you're illustrating a children's book, you're obviously drawing. We take the story, paginate it, and we have to do a certain number of pictures throughout the book. This was a series done by Cynthia Williams of a little girl and her friends, and it was a series of books. And I did all of these with colored pencil and a little bit of acrylic, but mostly colored pencil. And there were probably 9, 10 drawings in each one of the books. So it's just where you're taking a short story, you may just want 1 or 2 pieces for it, or you may want one to represent the whole thing, like we did on the last one we just showed, the truck driver. Where in a children's book like this, we're paginating it and doing something for each section.
Betty, is there something...
And in this case, she was...
No,
sorry,
there's a little delay here, so I'm sorry if I'm interrupting you. But I wondered if is there some technique that or some skill you develop when you're doing multiple images of characters throughout a book that allow you to carry the image from different points of view, different angles, and indeed if the child, if this child grows during the story, the changes that occur with age. How do you I know it's an impossible question, but is there something you learned to be able to do this?
It's a possible question. Well, this set of books was done in a relatively short period of time, so the age change was not too rapid. You know, with children, it can change every couple of weeks, but I just had to keep in mind, once I created the little girl, then she just became part of my thought pattern. So changing her was not an option. And the same thing with the other children. I just, in the beginning, created every one of the children, and
Right.
just stuck with that.
Right. Great. Thanks. I'd like to put up now the Suchin anti-ozone in the bedroom. Well, that we can. This is Suchin and Harry, and this is Peter's drawing. It's for a short story, Suchin's Escape. Peter, how did this conceptualization come about for you with this story? All right, we've just switched to I hope it's on your screen too, to anti-ozone in the bedroom reading. But I'd like to ask you another question. We'll go back to the previous one in just a moment. This drawing, in so many ways, seems to have layers of color and feeling, and almost three-dimensional without three-dimensional techniques. And I wondered what your technique was here. How much computer are you using? How much drawing? How do you integrate those? How do you do your coloring and that sort of thing?
Well, then I can start off the process in two ways. I can either start by drawing it initially on the computer the whole way through. But with this one, I started drawing it in pencil to get the lines right. And then I scan it into the computer, color it, and I try out different techniques through process of elimination to find out what would, say for example, suggest the feeling of the blanket over her shoulder. So I would suggest a texture that simulated, you know, a sort of a soft blanket. And I would try to pick my colors carefully to create a distance between two parts of the scene, and also a bit of just to try within this particular scene. You know, obviously this story was, you know, a very powerful one, and it still remains powerful in my head. So, it's got these intense little scenarios. So the colors are striking and designed to jump off the page, especially with Suchin, just for the nature of her character and the nature of the story.
I certainly do feel excuse me, Peter. Again, the lag is severe for me here. But in this drawing, I have to say that anti-ozone is a sort of madam for these two child prostitutes, and she's reading a story to one of the prostitutes who's in bed there and nonverbal at this time. And Suchin is in the foreground, and she's being excluded. And I think you've captured the exclusion of Suchin so well in that position. Can we go to the next? Actually, was the previous drawing though with Harry? Yes. Could you talk a little bit about how this conceptualization comes about? This is also from Suchin's Escape, and Harry is one of the handlers of these child prostitutes, and particularly in the story, the handler for Suchin, and he and his cousin are paired in this. But Harry has a deep caring for Suchin. They share music together, which I think brings them together. Could you talk a little bit about your thinking about when you read that book and that story, and how you came up with this drawing?
Well, Bill, I mean, the story, as I say, it was very powerful, and in the strength of the characters, and particularly, I like, Harley's character. I mean, it's a conflicted person, and kind of a big bear, a big softy underneath too. So, I mean, I tried to bring out. You can see by his size, he's a formidable character, but I tried to bring out in his eyes just the kind of, because he through the story it seems he just reacts emotionally, be it good or bad. But in this instance with her, he can't help himself. It's kind of, he just has this caring role, and I tried to bring that out through his eyes, and they almost contradict the size of him and his imposing nature. So, and I tried to bring that.
Yes.
Particularly the way he's carrying her. Every little suggestion with body to show might and fragility, and the conflict in it. So yeah, I mean, Harry's character naturally spoke out to me like that. Suchin's as well. So this was this scene before the doctor's office, or as he brings her into the doctor's office. So,
yes. Yes.
Yeah, just focused it on those and dragged the background out behind him so that they stay at the center of the picture, center of that particular part of the story.
Right. Very pleasant work for me. Excellent. Thanks. Could you put up the next picture? You've done sort of symbolic drawings for a couple of the short stories. This one is the Golden Flute, where a woman's husband, who's a doctor, has left her, and she is trying to attract a former boyfriend in revenge, and she collects money to buy him a golden flute. He's a flute player and playing an old tin flute, and this golden flute is supposed to be her entrance into a new relationship. And it's not quite as light and direct as I explained it. There's quite a bit of emotion in this, and I thought your diagram in this symbolic way of the woman inside the flute was so effective. And you also did that. And could you show the next drawing for me too? This is the necklace. And this is the story about a necklace that is stolen in Delhi from a couple from Alabama. And the theft of that necklace precipitates crisis in the couple and their friends, and finally just results in disaster for the whole group. This is a drawing that I'd like you to tell us about your technique with black and white, and your thinking about what's important in this. Obviously the necklace, but as you prioritized the importance of the images in this drawing.
Each story, obviously, certain bits speak out more than others, and sometimes, I strip them down like this to keep the simplicity of the idea, because it seemed like for those stories that it was essential to keep the fluidity of the group. But each one of them spoke in different ways. So in some of them, the idea is more symbolic, and in others, sometimes literal. And in this one, it's all around that necklace and characters around that, and the place, the nature of it. So I kept the idea fairly symbolic and simple in this, as I tried to do with the others, because it just seemed like that was the right thing to do. And they're different in nature than the stories like Suchin, and as they're shorter, then it becomes more of a bulletin point to suggest that an element in the story. So they're more embellishments in some cases, and more of a tried to have a sort of a good little clever idea with others. Each story speaks in different ways, and then you have to focus with the continuity after the idea to try and bring them all as a set. So I mean, as an individual image, you know, I could have went several directions, but as a group, after reading the stories, it seemed logical to use a very simple method to just hammer home a very simple idea, because the stories themselves are the biggest element. So the pictures are literally there just to introduce an idea or a section.
Great, thanks. Betty, and we can put the drawings away for the time being. Betty, when you're creating characters, what standards do you go by? I mean, in developing particularly the images that will identify the characters? Do you go to a representational view of what you perceive the writer's concept is, or do you develop a concept from your own reading? How do you do that? And do you try to make the image in a story specific or more generic, so that the viewer can form their own images when they encounter the character in the book? When you approach this this problem, which as a non-artist I see as a problem, how do you consider it, and what do you do?
Well, as far as creating the image, I've had writers come to me, and a lot of times they specifically know what they want their individual to look like, and so basically I create it. My preference, obviously, is just to say, well, here's the story, create this person or create this idea. Any artist would say that, probably, just to have the freedom of your own, putting your own ideas into it. You yourself are an artist, and I think you probably have in mind a certain thought as far as artwork. And when you do a short story or a book, you say, well, I want the illustrations for this to be realistic, or to be more abstract. I like to convey feelings as far as creating individuals or situations. I like for the person looking at it to get a real emotional tie to it, to the artwork. Not so much concerned about specific ways that they look, but how they feel about what they're looking at. That's what's important to me. And of course, realism is what I do, so everything I do
what makes you
very, very realistic.
Emphasize setting versus people versus symbols versus action when you're considering a story? Is there something about the individual story that sends you into one more than the other?
Yeah, I think so. Like I said a while ago, generally whatever I'm reading, I'll read several times to really get a feel for the story itself, and then see how that feeling affects what I want to portray. And I never know. Sometimes I'll read it and I'll have an idea, and I'll think I'm going to do this, or I'm going to create it this way, or I'll go with a certain scene, and then all of a sudden, as I get down to do it, I think, no, that's not what I want. Here's what I want to do. Just like the one of Enid at the fence. That whole story was based around she and her friends wanted to clean up their neighborhood. So when we paginated that book, the obvious thing was to have the kids out there cleaning up trash in their neighborhood. And that's the direction I was going, only I couldn't get started with the drawing. It just wasn't coming to me like that. And then all of a sudden I thought, no, that's not what it's about. It's not just about cleaning up her neighborhood. It's about the way she feels about what she's looking at. So when that hit me, then I stepped into the other side of the fence and looked at her so I could show her and get from her feeling
Right.
of what
Right.
she needed
Thanks.
to
Thanks,
do
Betty.
and
Peter,
how she felt about what was going on.
is there an advantage of drawing over photographic or collages used as illustration? And if there is an advantage, what is the advantage you see?
Sorry, Bill, I missed the first part of the question. There's a bit of a freeze there. Apologies.
Sure, thanks. I was just asking about comparing drawing and photographic illustrations and collages as illustrative techniques. Is there an advantage to drawing in your mind? You obviously do it, so it must be, but why is there an advantage?
Well, I mean, I think, to be honest, I mean, every illustrator or artist finds their own mediums, and now as things progress with technology, there's actually more options. So now somebody like me who normally just illustrates through drawing can collage and can actually collage in pieces on computer as well. So yeah, the lines are constantly getting blurred. Sometimes in the essence of drawing, I mean, you can it's like shorthand at times. So sometimes an idea needs to be conveyed quick, or you need to grab at something, then it's quicker to draw something down, for me, personally, and not of other people. But having said that, I find myself as I grow and learn that, you know, I end up using a lot more, sometimes more realistic, sometimes more cartoon, just more and more techniques to embellish whatever project I'm on. It's a constant learning more than anything else, more than that.
Yes, thanks. I'd like to stick with you, Peter, and ask you, I know you're working on a graphic novel, and what are the challenges of working on a graphic novel? I'm sure there are artists that are listening that are considering that sort of undertaking.
Well, I mean, you know, you already talked about that sort of topic with Betty about, you know, continuity between sequenced imaging. That's a big thing, because obviously when you illustrate, you try and speak a story, you try and show a story through one drawing. But now, when you try and create a graphic novel, obviously the story is the most important element, so the drawings have to you know, carry on a rhythm with that. So that was a new learning process for me. I mean, so mostly that timeline, and again the array of techniques you can use to achieve the end product is fantastic. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of changes, but very, very exciting in the sense of more things to learn and more tools and just getting better as an artist.
Peter, we've been working on scripting back and forth from long distances. Is there something about the scripting that helps you, that you could express for us?
Yes, I mean, the thing I love about this the most is the working together on this, because we really, you know, the author and the illustrator have to work hand in hand with this, or it just doesn't work. It's two minds coming together, create continuity between the words and the images. So it's a fascinating process as far as I'm concerned. And actually the script is actually the most important element, because it shorthands, you know, the difference between your stories and when we have the script. I mean, it's a big change, but it really helps narrow down the amount of images and angles you can have per scene. So if the author didn't create something like a script, the artist would be frantically grabbing around every chapter to try and find a point. But, you know, like as you've talked with Betty also, the ideas that come are equally, you know, as me and you are working, or they're yours and mine. I found that sometimes I've come up with ideas that you like, and then you've come up with ideas that I like. And so I think the most important thing with this is just being open-minded and being able to take either rein equally, because I think the nature of each story you do, it always goes between the author and the artist. But the script is so important because, like I said, it helps narrow down bulletins and important points, fortunately, that the author has about his own story, and helps me hone in to the point of these stories quicker. And because, you know, obviously it's a big project, so, you know, time is of the essence. So definitely the script is hugely important.
What is the time commitment? Can you kind of give us an estimate as to how long it takes to do a graphic novel as an artist in collaboration?
Well, you know, everything depending on the size of the novel and the nature of the stories, because obviously, depending on timelines or the time based the story is based in. I mean, research can eat up a lot of time, and certainly finding the right look and feel for the story. I mean, something like you know, 100 to 200 pages, you're talking anything up to a year or more, you know, and because there's just, you find that you go so far down the rabbit hole and then another one opens, because you just want to give more to the story. So you have ideas as you're going, and even though you're whittling your process down, more ideas come. So it's kind of like important to leave the door open a little bit so that you can still improve on what you've done. As everything, you know, in ideas and creation is in flux. So it's important to be able to create a stop-off point, but also to be able to constantly blend as well. So, I mean, depending, I mean, on the time and the kind of stories based in, that can eat up a lot. If it's you know, something based 100 years ago, everything from the clothes, the scenery, the transport, the way, you know, there's so many elements to consider. But that's what makes it amazing to work on, is because it's the most honest challenge you could do as an artist, and I'm sure equally for you as a writer.
We'll be publishing this primarily on this graphic novel on the internet, and secondarily in print. And I wanted to ask Betty about the approach to drawing for the internet as opposed to drawing for print, in the sense that just the size on screen, for example, the size on iPads, the size on a laptop or a PC, and the size on iPhones. Is that a consideration? Is that a consideration for you as you're drawing now, where images will be used in multiple places, and what adjustments do you make or suggest?
I haven't done that much artwork as far as what's going to be published to be used on iPads or even apps. But I think the big consideration that's going to come with that, because most of what I've done has been in print, I think when we did the surgeon's wife, that was to be an app, part of an app, and iPad and everything. We're going to need to simplify the artwork as much as possible, more, which we didn't have to do as long as it was done on paper. But as we go along, we're going to be using the phone more and more for everything we do, and the screens are small. So, like the piece of the surgeon's wife, where they're in Jackson Square, that might be a little bit of a problem as far as really getting a good visual of that on a small screen. So I think simplification of the art's going to be very important as we go along.
Right. Peter, I know you're working with the webmaster to work on formatting a special format, actually, for the graphic novel, where everybody can have a sense of what the panels are before and after, and what this story is developing, while being able to examine the image itself in different magnifications and so on. Has your thinking changed as you develop these panels for a graphic novel, because it will be on the internet rather than in a comic book or a graphic novel format?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's brought in a lot of changes in the way that I approach my work, in the sense that the variety of screen sizes, as you mentioned, is certainly something to be considered. And then, as an afterthought, the print. So, mostly just changing the way I work a little bit, but it's not being too troublesome. It just feels like that's the way things are now, and that you just gotta keep up and keep toeing the line and new techniques. Certainly, I've switched over to the computer a lot more, both for resizing and speed, and also the amount of when you're drawing in ink, obviously there's less room for errors. But when you're drawing on the computer, it's obviously hard to achieve the same potency as ink a lot of the time. But through practice and technique, you can achieve anything really with it. And the ability to change things as much as you want is certainly amazing thing to have on your side. But definitely a lot more digital as far as I'm concerned, especially since we mentioned the project we're working on, and it just seems to fit together a lot better. More logical.
Great, thanks very much. Well, our time is running short, and I'd just like to thank both of you for participating in this session this evening. It's been wonderful hearing your thoughts and views on illustration for literary fiction, which I think has become less common than it was in the days of Sherlock Holmes stories, and I think that's sadness. So I'm going to try to continue to support artists who will be illustrating literary fiction. I would encourage artists to look for this, because I think it's a really challenging area, and very, very helpful for an artist's career. So at any rate, thanks again, and look forward to seeing you both at different times in the near future. And say hello to Daisy for me, and say hello to Sally, and I'll look forward to seeing you soon. And thanks all of you who have been listening and joining in, and all the best to all of you. Good night.